Hi, my name is Paul Geldeloos and I am the builder and designer of Oasis Hybrid home, the first one in the world. What it means is that the home is designed to capture and drink in all the elements that Mother Nature is giving already freely. And this means electrical, heat, water, even hot water is being made by the sun. You can probably hear from the sound behind me here is a windmill and a solar panel that are both responsible for all the electric in the house. Current gets sent underneath the ground through wires into batteries in a storage room inside of the house. Also, this house is designed to capture the sun by a passive solar greenhouse, or atrium as we call it. It's facing south and has east and west wings so that it can follow the sun, or it can capture the sun all throughout the day. Special here too on this house is the rainwater collection system, which is done by means of the roof, of course, but by oversized gutters that collect not only the rain but also the snow in the wintertime, and by a hydronic loop inside of the gutters is able to melt the snow and the ice and put it as water in storage tanks underneath the ground. The other special thing about this is that it has solar hot water panels on the roof that exist out of evacuated glass tubing that have a special design which will store hot water in tanks down in the basement that can be used for a variety of jobs. Let's go check it out. Welcome! We've just talked about the electrical system, which is the solar panels and the windmill, and the electricity is generated from there. As you can hear the wind whipping through the windmill now. It's being underground, being funneled into an electric room that we're going into now. As you can see here, there is 24 batteries there that receive 24 volts from the solar panels and the windmill, and then these inverters right here will invert that 24 volts into a normal 110, which then results in having a normal 110 panel with normal breakers, and everything in the house is just normal appliances and so on. These batteries are a special type battery. As you can see, they're completely closed off on the top, and that makes them ideal for residential use because they have there's no outgassing here like you normally would have with a lead-acid battery. So no dangerous gases or toxic gases are emitted from these batteries. Also, the backup power is normal grid electric power, and the panel is over there right next to the panel that supplies the house. And it will be a backup for putting electric in these batteries when they run low. Then it automatically and seamlessly switches over to normal AC power. Which is the atrium right at the south side of the house. Which the entry are these huge doors. When you come over here, you'll see a strange looking little box. It is the first stage in the grey water recycling configuration that we have here. It erodes any possible particles that might be in the grey water and exposes it to the sunlight, and then another splash of water goes in through erosion, eventually gets small enough to pass through the irrigation system that is installed right here in this planter. This planter exists out of a 3-foot deep trough with 18 inches of rock on the bottom, 2 inches of sand. Then the irrigation system is there, and then there's about a foot of topsoil. The plants interact with the grey water that is being irrigated into this atrium and purify it to some extent. What is not used by the plants goes down to the bottom of this trough, and then gravity feeds to the end into two 55-gallon drums from where it is pumped to the toilets for toilet flushing. That's how this grey water system works. And as you can see, these plants, they literally love it here. You can see the squash is growing quite tall, and we're hoping to harvest some nice vegetables from here. This is the other added benefit of the atrium, is that it actually produces a beautiful garden right from your living room from here. When you open these doors, as I explained before, the temperature that's collected in that atrium will automatically come into the house. And then there is some distribution system here that will actually carry the heat all in different places. We have two of these large entrances here, which are usually open during spring, fall and winter. The only time that we have them closed is actually summertime, because it gets a little too warm in there if you want to keep the house cool. I was just explaining about solar heat and thermal mass. As you can see, we got concrete floors here, stained concrete floors. And of course, during the winter, when the sun is much lower and these doors are opened, the sun will strike far into the house, all during the day, and heat up at a very low and gradual temperature. It will heat up this slab, which then provides heat for the structure during the night. This big, huge, what they call Finnish or Russian style mass oven is designed to give the heat off to the thermal mass directly around it. You can see it's a massive chimney which is double walled and has that ability to absorb that heat and then give it off at a very slow, low temperature during the day or during the night. This also doubles up as a barbecue, indoor barbecue. As you can maybe see through this grill, there's a big 10-inch chimney on top of this, so that when you open these flaps completely, the heat basically goes straight out of the chimney. This particular wood stove, even during the summer when you do a barbecue, does not give a lot more heat than a normal campfire would. And during the winter, when you close the doors, and if you want heat at any time, you just put these like about 3/4, half closed, and that will start giving heat to the thermal mass directly around the stove instead of sending it out the chimney. Again, heat source and thermal mass working together to give off a very gentle and slow heat. I can show you the master bathroom, which will indicate that you do not need to minimalize your design just because you're an off-the-grid and alternative energy home. This is a very nice bathroom with a triangular tub, a soaking tub. You soak in your own rainwater basically from the roof. There is a nice shower here. We have dual flush toilets, which saves on water. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they have a small button just for the number 1 and a larger button for the number 2, which means 0.6 gallons for the little one and a gallon 0.6 for the big one. And that in itself saves an enormous amount of water during the year. Another water saving feature that we have done here is we've made the hot water to have a circulating loop driven by a small circulating pump that goes close to whatever fixture will supply warm water. And so there's always warm water immediately available. This takes, to get warm water here, it takes about 3 seconds. It's hot right now. Again, a water saving feature. So now what we will do is we'll go upstairs and take a look at the gutters that are forming such an essential part of the water collection system. Since we live in somewhat of an arid area here, we need to collect every single drop of precipitation hitting the roof, including snow. We live in Montana here, so it's somewhat of a cold place in the winter. So what we need is when the snow falls on the roof and it slides down the pretty slick metal, we collect it in this big flat gutter there, under the metal of which is an hydronic loop driven by the solar panel that you see as well over there. And it is capable of melting the snow and ice in the gutter and put it in the tanks as water. during the winter time. You also see the hot water making panels over there, which are glass tubes with copper inside and acetone inside of those copper tubes, and that has a low boiling point, and the sun hits it and drives the boiling acetone up to the headers, where it then heats exchanged with a glycol water mix, which then goes down to the basement and heat exchange with regular water in a tank. Again, on the subject of making warm water, as I showed you below, there's the Russian mass oven that we have there, and there's actually an inner and an outer wall on that chimney, on the lower portion of the chimney, creating a chamber that has a old radiator installed. Which has a glycol mix in it again, and is able to further heat those tanks that are functioning as warm water storage tanks down in the basement. What this is set up to do is, in the instance where you wouldn't have sun, let's say for a week, you wouldn't gain much passive solar obviously, then what you would do is you turn the stove on, and the stove would heat up this radiator, and then that hot water in that radiator will be transferred to the hot water tanks down in the basements and heat exchange with those. We're going to the basement and I'll show you those hot water tanks that collect the solar. This looks somewhat like a huge setup, and it doesn't have to be done this way. I happen to get these 3 tanks for free, and that's why I use them, but one tank can be enough for a household. More storage is of course advantageous. What happens here is the warm water from the panel that I was just showing you on the roof gets heat exchanged with hot water that's collected in this tank, which is directly fed by the cold water line. And so the hot water from the panel up on the roof heats exchanged with this water stored in here. Then that water gets pushed further along, closer to the point of exit, and it becomes hotter all the time. As you can see, the water here is 94 degrees, and in the next tank it's already 121. If we could film how hot this was, then you'll realize that you can barely even touch this. And this is what's the exiting hot water for domestic use. They do a variety of jobs. There is domestic hot water, as we said. There is floor heat, floor loop in the concrete, and then there is a hot water snow melt loop also. That all is being done from these 3 tanks. And that little box behind you there is a evaporating boiler, which has a smart computer on board and can actually delegate the right temperature to whatever job it needs to do. Shower usually is hotter water than for the floor. Here we are back in the kitchen again, and I'm going to a little bit of a conclusion here. The one other thing that I wanted to mention is this area here is of course not affected so much by the passive solar that comes from the atrium. In order to keep this warm in the winter time, we have that small circulating pump that is pushing warmer fluids throughout the house and equalizing the whole slab out from the warmer places to the cooler places. Along with that, we also have what we call an anti-stratification system. It's a fancy word for really just a duct system, which in the living room where we have these high ceilings, the heat collects automatically up in the peak, and there is a duct that pulls that hot air from up there and brings it out into spaces that need it, like for instance a north-facing bedroom or this kitchen. So you can be good for yourself and can be good for the environment at the same time and still live in a beautiful home.